How Pathbreaking Native Doctor Susan Flesche Picotte Crossed Frontiers in Nebraska History. Allison Lone Elk. Susan Flesche Picotte was the first Native American in the United States to become a doctor. She was born and raised on the Omaha Reservation in Nebraska. During her career, she served over 1,300 people. Her career opened the doors for Native Americans in the United States. Susan Flesche Picotte faced the frontier of indigenous medicine. Before Susan's birth. In 1862, 3 years before Susan Flesche was born, Congress passed the Homestead Act. This act guaranteed that settlers would receive 160 acres of land in the American West if they would take to farming. The purpose of this act was to have more people set out into Middle America to develop those lands into healthy farms. The Homestead Act directly impacted the Omaha Nation. As more people were coming onto the lands of the native people, settlers claimed the land of the Omaha, and they were moved onto the reservation. Susan's family. Susan was born on the Omaha Reservation in Thurston County, Nebraska on June 17th of 1865. Her parents were Joseph and Mary Flesche. Joseph had a significant impact on all of his children's lives. He always motivated them to pursue an education. Joseph believed that the only way for the Omaha people to succeed was through learning the way of the white world. He instilled that belief within Susan. Susan had 5 siblings: Suzette Flesche, who became a writer; Marguerite Flesche, an educator; Rosalie Flesche, an advocate for Native people; and her brother, Francis Flesche, an ethnologist. He later worked at the Smithsonian. Though they all had different beliefs about assimilation, all 5 siblings worked to improve life for the Omaha people. Susan's education. In 1870, when Susan was 5 years old, she attended a mission school on the reservation. She finished in 1879 at 14. After finishing, Susan and her sister Marguerite left Nebraska. They were sent to the Elizabeth Institute for Young Women in New Jersey. After returning from New Jersey, Susan briefly worked at the Quaker Mission School on the reservation. While working there, she met Alice Fletcher, her colleague, a philanthropist and native rights advocate who encouraged Susan to continue her studies and earn her medical degree. Susan began medical school in 1886, studying at the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania. The Connecticut Indian Association helped to fund Susan's education. She graduated valedictorian in 1889, at 24. Susan Flesche was the first Native American in the United States to earn a medical degree. Though it might not have been realized at the time, this was a monumental step in the right direction for Native Americans. Starting her career. In August of 1889, Susan was offered a job as government physician at the Omaha Agency School. Susan was responsible for teaching students about hygiene and taking care of their health. Even though Susan was only obligated to care for the people at the school, for many of the people around her, Susan was their only option. She would even work 20-hour days to care for the over 1,000 people that relied on her. Susan impacted her community greatly. She was widely regarded and trusted. Susan often made house calls for the people. The Connecticut Indian Association again continued to support Flesche and provided her with medical tools and supplies. She was able to treat tuberculosis, influenza, cholera, and trachoma. Within 4 years of working as government physician, Susan became ill and bedridden for weeks. She later resigned in 1893 at 28 years old to take care of her sick mother. Susan's later life. In June of 1894, at 29, Susan married her husband, Henry Picotte. Her sister Marguerite was married to Henry's brother, Charles Picotte. By 1898, Henry and Susan had 2 children, Carl and Pierre. She continued practicing medicine after having her children. Susan was also well known for her advocacy involving temperance. Susan had witnessed the issue that alcohol created on the reservation firsthand. Henry Picotte suffered from alcoholism himself. Susan campaigned against alcohol and even embraced efforts of a local prohibition. In 1905, Henry Picotte passed away. Susan was 40. After this, Susan became more active in discussing public health matters. Temperance increased. Men, women, and children drank. Men and women died from alcoholism, and little children were seen reeling on the streets of the town. Drunken brawls in which men were killed occurred, and no person's life was considered safe. Susan Flesche Picotte. Final years. Over time, Susan's health had been declining. She had struggled breathing and had chronic pain in her neck, head, and ears. After sustaining an injury from falling off her horse, Susan suffered with even more issues. In 1913, Susan used funding from her husband as well as donations to open her own private practice. She was too ill to work herself, but having her own hospital had always been an aspiration. Susan's hospital served whoever needed the help, white or native. On September 18, 1915, Susan passed away from bone cancer. Susan was 50 years old. She spent her entire life dedicated to serving her people. Her sons went on to live full lives after their mother's passing in 1915. Carl had a career in the United States Army and fought in World War II. Pierre stayed in Walt Hill most of his life, where he raised 3 children. Susan's impact. Susan's original dream hospital is still here today in Walt Hill, Nebraska. Unfortunately, the hospital is at risk. The building is empty and in need of restoration. Currently, the Dr. Susan Flesche Picotte Center is working to raise funds to restore the hospital as a center for the people. They hope that her original hospital can tell her story and keep her legacy alive. While making this documentary, I was able to speak with Britt Thedinger. He is a medical doctor and president of the Dr. Susan Flesche Picotte Center, the center which is dedicated to restoring Susan's original hospital as well as her home in order to keep her story alive.
In the long run, it'll be positive, by all means. Plus, hopefully it'll be a little economic boost to the community because people will travel there to take the tour and to see these sites.
So do you believe that Susan fits this year's theme for National History Day, Frontiers in History? And if you do, why so?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, she's the ultimate frontier person. I mean, again, the story is just so compelling. That's how I got involved in this, because I thought, my God, this woman's a true Nebraska hero. What a role model and what a trailblazer. I mean, women back then just didn't do this. They didn't do it because they weren't afforded the opportunity. People say there's no way you're going to go to medical school. It's like, what parent back then would say, Susie, we want you to go to medical school? That was just not happening. You were supposed to be a mom and a homemaker.
So as you're saying, like the standards for women at the time and the expectations they have for women, did Susan herself receive any pushback from deciding to?
I think so, but remember, her father was very insistent that all 4 of the daughters learn English, participate in Western wear attire, living in houses. We got to get out of the Earth Lodge. We got to assimilate. We got to fit in because the white man's coming. And if we don't assimilate, we're not going to survive. So I think her parents were, I think Joseph, her father, was just adamant that she learn English and that she goes to school. I mean, that was a big deal.
Do you have any follow-up information?
No, I just think at some point when we get this thing restored, you need to come visit. Take a road trip. And plus, since you're Oglala Sioux, so I mean, I think people, it's unfortunately, you should be talking to somebody up on the Oma tribe, rather than some old white guy, but she's a Native woman who I think should resonate with every Native American in the country. So you doing this and telling this story, and so if someone else tells this story, I think it's just a great role model. So it's like, hopefully in today's world, Allison, if you wanted to go to medical school, you could do that if you wanted to. Dr.
Susan Flesche was the first Native American in the United States to earn a medical degree. She was now a standing woman and a pioneer for Native people. Her education, career, and work forged the way in the Native American frontier of pursuing white society. Susan Flesche dedicated her life to her people and cemented herself as a hero in Nebraska history. We who are educated have to be pioneers of Indian civilization. We have to prepare our people to live in the white man's way, to use the white man's books, and to use his laws if you will only give them to us. The shores of success can only be reached by crossing the bridge of faith. Susan Flesche Picotte.